You are listening to the HYDAC podcast. In each episode, we share our knowledge with you in topics related to hydraulics and automation and control, from the basics to the current trends. Stay tuned. Welcome to this episode of HYDAC podcast. I'm your host, William Shaw, and on this episode, we'll be discussing the complete system and component solutions for gensets and pump sets in the Australia region. Today in our studio, I have Mr. Andrea Cimadoro. Andrea is HYDAC's National Development Manager for Cooling Systems. Andrea has more than 20 years' experience in the aero and thermodynamics industry around the globe. So Andrea, thank you for your time today and thank you for coming into the studio.
It's a pleasure to be again in your studio.
So just coming back to the topic of this podcast, would you be able to tell us a little bit about what a genset is and what common areas that this is used in?
Yes, certainly. The genset is a combination of a prime mover, typically an engine, and connected with an alternator. So the engine converts the chemical energy of the diesel, of the fuel, into a mechanical energy, and then the mechanical energy is then used to spin an alternator which produces electrical power.
So also in the topic of this podcast, there's also pump set. Would you be able to explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So what I explained before, same things. The difference is that from the mechanical energy, we attach a pump. And the pump, in case of HYDAC, hydraulic company, is normally an hydraulic pump. But we also do a system where the pump is a water pump for irrigation, for the agriculture sector, or for the mining sector that they need to pump water from one place to another one. So that's actually a pump set, an engine and a mechanical pump, whether it's hydraulic or a water pump.
So you've touched on some of the applications there. Is this some of the typical places where we see gensets and pump sets?
Yes. So we see genset in mine site, where some mine site, the genset is really the electricity of the mine. When there are remote mine, they don't have electricity there. The genset is really the source of energy. They turn on the genset in the morning and they start working on the mine and they switch it on in the afternoon. But recently, we see a lot of genset in the data center industry. It's booming. It's a sector that is booming 10-20% every year on year. So we see a lot of backup genset, backup generator for security of these data center, the data mainly.
So how does hydraulics tie into some of these gensets and pump sets that are on these mine sites or in the data center applications? What's the role of hydraulics in this area?
Well, the role of hydraulic is still strong, especially in remote location, remote mining location. We do quite a few diesel-driven hydraulic power unit out of our Melbourne facility. The input came from our service partner, where they say to us, look, we need to do a remote job and we need hydraulic power and we need electric power, and we got nothing there. So then the only way to do it was to design special diesel-driven hydraulic power unit where we could have hydraulic power remotely and electric power remotely.
Since we have you here in the studio and you are an expert on the cooling side of hydraulics, how does cooling tie into generator sets?
Well, definitely what is happening is that a diesel engine convert the chemical of the diesel into mechanical energy, and it does that producing heat like any engine, any internal combustion engine. And so we are after the designing of the cooling package of the water jacket and the charge air cooler in the case of big engines. And what is interesting from the HYDAC point of view is that, especially in containerized installation, we design our cooling package not only to cool the engine, but actually to create the ventilation part for the genset in a containerized solution. So there's a lot of lack of knowledge globally on this kind of application, and HYDAC is, let's say, using at their advantage in this sector. So when a customer comes to us and say, can you design a full containerized cooling package, we take it as the whole idea of how the air will travel, how the air will go in and out of the container, how the air will also cool the engine and cool the circuit of the engine, the water jacket and charge air circuit. And also we are cooling the fuel line. So these are mainly the three circuits that we cool on a genset.
I imagine this would also be a fairly big consideration when designing generator sets and cooling for in data centers. So when they're in the basement or in the top of a building, how do we go about sizing up some of these things, or what are some of the design considerations that we'd need to look for when putting these cooling systems in for generator sets?
Yeah, we definitely start any project with the footprint, the real estate available. I have to be honest that, one of the HYDAC point of differentiation is the use of our technology, which is aluminum plate and bar. That's the technology we are using, which is very, very efficient when it comes to doing a cooling job in a short and confined space. That's why we've been certified in Europe for approved supplier for data center cooling package. And this is due to our ratio, space of material, space of cooling package versus cooling requirement. And of course, noise is also a big consideration. So space, noise, thermal job to perform, and also some of these projects they have maybe containerized solution, or they have remote installation of the cooling package, and remote can be on top of a container or it can be far away from the engine. So all those are the challenge that we face every day, and the challenge that we like to be involved every day when we design a cooling package.
So we've discussed the hydraulics and the cooling aspect of the generator sets. Is that all that HYDAC does? Is there anything else that they can add to the project for these customers that have remote mine sites or data centers or backup power generator sets?
Well, we are increasing our proposal in the market recently. We have worked on a couple of projects recently where we have given to the customer a lot of HYDAC components. So of course the cooling package, but we also giving the fuel cooler. We can also give the fuel pre-care on board of the engine. We are already certified on 2 or 3 big brands already. We also do conditioning of day tank. So that means it's a little diesel skid that pump the diesel every day from the day tank to another small tank and filter it and condition it. So that's very much appreciated in installation that, they are critical, like hospitals or emergency center, where the backup generator has to fire up in an emergency in case of loss of power, but you need to have the diesel very clean for your injector. And also, recently we have expanded our electronic division in Melbourne, so we can also supply to this industry PLC, programmed, bespoke program PLC to control the engine or the genset. Also, distribution board, if we do an installation on a big building and with a remote cooling package, you need a distribution board, cabling. So the HYDAC portfolio, it's increasing for that sector. So it's not only just one component or one system.
So essentially a customer just needs to bring the diesel-powered prime mover and the alternator, and HYDAC can provide the rest.
Yes, we have done project where we really just get free issue the engine, and we've done all the rest. And we've done the containerized solution. We have studied the noise. We developed how the air travel inside the container. We've done the oil cooler, the diesel cooler, oil cooler if there's an hydraulic pump, all the control, all the tank, fully designed and developed here in Melbourne by our engineering and electronic team.
So you briefly touched on some of the HYDAC projects just then. Would you be able to elaborate a little more on some of the ones that have previously been undertaken in Australia and also some of the upcoming ones?
Yes, definitely. So we've done a few of them by now, and we've done remote repowering of mine site in the north of Queensland. We have done special building. We have done Capital Square in Perth. Capital Square is a big building for a skyscraper in Perth, owned by Woodside. And there we got a 4 megawatt standby generator system in case the 3 building lost power. So that was very challenging. HYDAC win that project because we were the only one that could do the cooling power required in the underground level -1 at a certain value of noise. And we also done other project in the irrigation industry. We supply currently a couple of OEM where they do pump set on a regular basis for this agriculture sector. And we are also tendering on a few projects of data centers in Australia. So those are mainly the area where we are very strong. We got our biggest reference in Australia. It's a company in WA which basically rent power to mine site, to sites that are in development. So they have a 40-foot container, two 40-foot container with our cooling package on it, and as funny as can be a 40-foot container, that's what they do. They move the old 40-foot container, they bring it to a new developed mine site, they give electrical power, and then when the power comes, they remove again this thing. So why is the biggest Australian reference? Because we know that is working 24/7 since 3 or 4 years, absolutely no problem, with customer very happy. So I think that's the biggest Australian reference alive that we know.
So there's definitely some use for these gensets out in the market, especially with, you've talked about the increase of demand for data centers and remote mine sites. How do you see the future of gensets? Will they be replaced with upcoming technology like solar or the big battery being built by Tesla? Will this be a new trend and we'll see the decline of gensets?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, William. I like your question. Sometimes, you wake up in the morning and you think that the world is going to change electric in one day, and you go to bed and the next day you wake up and everything is electric. So I personally don't believe on that, especially in a country like Australia, North and South America, Africa, Russia. Those countries are huge, are massive, and there's always be a remote location. And so for me, the diesel genset type of business still have a good 10 year or more to be around us. So it's not going to disappear in the near future. And yes, it's going to be maybe transformed. We will have a more sophisticated engine, more hybrid engine, and more compact, more energy fuel consumption, better fuel consumption, less noisy. Yes, this will definitely be part of that, this development, but they will be around. They'll definitely be around. And yes, I hear you. We got a big solar farm, we got big battery farms. There will be more of that, and there will be less genset, but not disappearing in one blink of an eye.
Well, that's just about all we have time for. Thank you very much for coming into our studio today, Andrea.
Always a pleasure, William.
And thank you everyone for listening. Also, you can tune in to our webinar that Andrea will be presenting in the future. You can sign up to that at HYDAC.com.au. Hope to see you all in the future. Thanks for joining us on this episode of HYDAC Podcast. For an in-depth learning on the subject you've just listened to, enrol on the technical training at HYDAC Australia. For more information, visit our website, hydac.com.au. HYDAC. Global presence, local competence.